Last question. This is for Christian. So, a lot of you have been hearing about the Metaverse lately. I'm a bit in the unknown and the dark side. I have no idea what Metaverse is. Why does it even matter? Do we really need to care about it? So, Christian, can you help shed light to why should we care about the Metaverse? What is it? And how is it going to propel us into this new world order?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think for the purposes of the answer, maybe it's important to separate Metaverse from kind of Web3. You know, lots of conversations kind of bring those two things together. And I think there is a case for having them be a better together story. But maybe in the context of some recent events, and let's pick the pandemic because it seems like everybody else, wanted to use that as a theme. I can't imagine that there's a person in the room who hasn't suffered from, or maybe is still suffering from, video conference fatigue. The effects of that have been well documented, and I think over the last 2 years it's been incredibly unnatural for us all to be locked out of our offices globally and be forced not into work from home, but what we actually do was live at work. So, we extended our working hours, we took fewer breaks, and I don't have a problem with video calls and video conferencing, but the problem I have with it is that it's two-dimensional. So we don't have the same capability to interact like we do here. We don't see the world in 3D when we stare at a screen for 12 hours a day. And so from the Metaverse perspective, I think, given the fact that it's, at its very definition, is a 3D construct and a 3D visualization of the physical world, I think there's a lot of hope that I pin on that for collaboration going forward, especially if the notion of hybrid work, where we're not all tied to one location, is going to be the norm that we see coming post-pandemic. So I think within that context, I also think that the collaboration element of that will give rise to some what I would call peripheral technologies, such as augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, that really haven't found mainstream adoption, and certainly not in industry. Maybe they are more in the consumer world. And just for the Metaverse alone, Morgan Stanley have suggested that this could be an $8 trillion market opportunity in the next few years. So it's very difficult for technology companies to ignore this. I think the one thing that worries me a little bit about it is that it might not be in our working lifetime. If we think about the demographic shift and we think about the younger people coming into the workforce, and I'd like to talk about teenagers for a moment because I have 3 of them. And my teenage kids have grown up in the world of 3D. They've grown up collaborating with their friends in Minecraft. They've grown up learning and playing in Roblox. And they've also become accustomed to wearing different devices to immerse them into that 3D world. So I think it's highly likely that when that age group reaches the workforce, they'll be much more comfortable with immersion in a 3D world, bringing physical objects and renditions of those objects into the workplace, combining that with data and applications and new workflows. And I think that's really, really interesting from the point of view of what that might bring, not only in the kingdom, but in the rest of the world to a new generation of workforce. So let me park that for a moment and talk a little bit about Web3. And I think although the two things are separate in the way that we think about them as technologists, I think the way I would position Web3 is really a new kind of plumbing for a new kind of World Wide Web. You think about some of the things that we've seen historically in the where we had Web 1.0, Web 2.0, and now with Web 3.0, I think there are 2 fundamental things that are going to drive big differences. The first one is that being an enabler for new business models. And I think those business models will certainly in the first iterations be based largely upon cryptographic technology, token type technology that enables new types of business models. And I think the second thing, and perhaps most importantly, in trying to tie that back to the change in demographic, I think the expectation of a new workforce is that they will have more command and control over the types of digital content that they create, share, and interact with in this new world. So we're already seeing some examples of that with things like NFTs, non-fungible tokens. But I think what we'll find is that organizations will be very ready to adapt that new kind of thinking. And you can sort of see where that goes from a business perspective. Maybe we're talking about smart contracts or new workflows that are able to transcend traditional legal or geographical boundaries by using this type of new technology. So I think if you put those 2 things together, the plumbing and some of the use cases, and are they compatible? Yeah, absolutely 100%.
Amazing. So as we're wrapping up this panel, I would like each of our panelist members here today to give us some food for thought. Where are we headed with automation? And leave each of the audience members here today with some practical advice. We all come to these conferences and we leave all gung-ho, and then 2 days later we forget everything that we've spoken about. So what is one piece of advice that you would give to each of the members here today, how they can contribute to innovation and bettering mankind?
So maybe if I may start. So what's certainly a challenge for all of us, and we heard this just, is that, it's not about the technology or the people, it's really, to adapt and be able and willing to transform. And certainly for the younger generation, it's easier than for the, I don't want to call my generation here, but maybe you know it. But it's a little bit more difficult for us. I also have kids, right? Sometimes they're going to tell me how to work on my iPad or my iPhone and do this and do that. And here in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, we have a program, global program, which is basically the empowerment of the youth people. It's called YPP. And here in Saudi, we already have skilled about 650 Saudi nationals to really on their soft skills, on an SAP skills. We're also working together here in the Kingdom on a dual study program with 8 universities, where also people are coming into the country and into the company. And with more than 100,000 people, it's very important that you get those young people into the organization who are really driving and helping to drive that change forward, right? I think this is for some of the organizations, and we have a lot of customers, as you know, around the world. Some of these organizations we see, even if they have the technology and they could leverage the technology, but some of them, they're not really willing to really adapt it and implement it and use it going forward. It's not just about doing a technical transformation from one system to the other. It's really about changing the business processes, adding the value, being aware of that users are different to before. So the adoption and the willingness to transform, I think this is a key part, and that conference here, I'm sure it will really help and sustainably help, to use that term, going forward and drive this generation and support the Vision 2030 for the kingdom.
Excellent.
Sure. I think that the one thing I would leave as a piece of advice is to embrace as much automation as possible. I think the days of the augmented worker are already here, whether we readily recognize it or not. And I think a lot of the software-based robots, hardware-based robots, technologies like artificial intelligence are already here and helping us to remove a lot of what I would call busy work from the things that we do every day. There are lots of things that computers and technology are really good at, such as repetitive tasks and highly automated functions. And there's lots of good things that humans are good at, such as emotional reasoning and creativity and making decisions and strategies based on experience and lots of other conditions that are understood and absorbed much more readily by humans than they are by robots and technology. So the reason why I think it's important is that what we really ought to be trying to do is free as much of our human capital as possible to work on the things that drive innovation. And I think the question I get asked all the time is, how many jobs will robots replace? And I think the answer is a lot. But perhaps the question more is, how many jobs will be created by freeing up the brilliant, smart people in all our organizations to actually work on the things that drive business and let the robots and the technology do what they're good at, but more so invest in the humans and let them do what they're good at.
Excellent.
Okay, so my advice would be, I don't think my mic is working.
Maybe a bit closer.
Hello, hello? It doesn't work. So maybe you can go.
Is it not working?
It doesn't work.
Yes.
It works now. Okay. So my advice would be, go for it. Go for it. I'm addressing that to the young people here. I advise them to read 3 times the Vision 2030 document, which to my point of view is one of the best documents that I have read since a long time for a nation. And they should participate in contributing in that document. It's fantastic. If I would be a young person here, I would do that, 100%. That's my advice. Go for it.
Great practical advice. So I hope everyone does their homework when they get home.
Yeah, so it's hard to add on to what my colleagues have said. I would add just... Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's hard to add on to what my colleagues have said. I like just go for it. I would say to be constantly curious and be a lifelong learner. Those are skills that never go away. I will touch just another dimension. We talk about the work environment, but we live in a planet with lots of problems as well, and I think we all have the ability to use innovation for good. I have a daughter who's obsessed with sustainability, and we just launched an eco-benefits platform where you're able to see with every transaction you make the impact on the environment. And you can either change your behavior, you can buy carbon offsets. So there are many different ways we as consumers can use innovation for good in the planet. And I'd also say it's great to get the training and skills to be productive members of the workforce. Keep in mind that social good that we can all do as well as consumers.
Amazing. Well, there you have it. I thank each one of you for coming out here, leaving us with practical advice and food for thought, or tech for thought in this case. And I hope everyone will reflect on everything that our panelists have shared with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bina.
Thank you.